Okay, and I'll turn it over to Vanessa to introduce our speaker.
Hi, this month's speaker is Julie, presenting a talk called Botanizing the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet in Northwestern California. Julie is a retired Shasta-Trinity National Forest botanist. She also has participated in the publication of a book on the Shasta-Trinity plants through Backcountry Press, which is how I came across Julie's work. Her talk description is as follows. What makes the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet special floristically? A combination of diversity of topography, elevation, substrate, a lot of water, snowmelt and groundwater, springs, river and perennial streams, a lot of rock, large continuous areas of serpentinite, peridotite, and the great age of the landscape are what makes this special place for people who love plants. We will discuss geology, logistics, of getting to the good places, and we will present information on the endemic and disjunct plants of the area. Just from talking with Julie and scheduling this presentation, I'm really looking forward to hearing from Julie. I've always wondered what it would be like to just be a practitioner out in the world botanizing incredible places of serpentine influence, and these plants are of special interest to our chapter, of course. And so I turn the screen over to you, Julie, and thank you so much for joining us. Please join us next month. Our talk will be on December 16th at 7 p.m. And you will see an announcement for that soon for the members. But without further ado, Julie Kierstead. Thank you so much for joining us. Everyone's clapping in their Zoom. Friendly welcome. Yeah, I'm going to turn all my stuff off, but I'll monitor the chat for questions.
Okay, great. I hope I have put on the screen the right presentation, but we're going to blunder through it one way or the other. I wanted to reassure you that I'm not a Californicator that has intruded on your space. I grew up in Coos Bay. I did my undergraduate at Oregon State University and got a botany degree, worked in Portland for a while. And then like you do, I met a guy, moved to California, got a job, and I worked for the Shasta-Trinity National Forest for 30 years in Redding, which turned out to be a pretty wonderful thing. And interestingly enough, one of the things that's not really clear, I think, in Southwestern Oregon and Northwestern California is that they're actually hooked together. And so the fact that I'm an Oregonian who was exiled to California and worked in this great place for 30 years, and then I moved back to Ashland a year ago is my mission is to stitch these things together. That is, we are all part of this greater geographic area that is my lifelong career focus, which is called the Klamath Ranges or the Klamath Mountains. And on the Oregon side of the border, we call it the Siskiyous. On the southern side of the border into California, it's either called the Klamath Ranges or it's called the Trinity Alps and the Marble Mountains and the Russians and blah, blah, blah. There's a bunch of subtypes, but it's all the Klamath Ranges. So we are sisters and brothers here. So the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet is I hope you'll come here. It's not very far away. It's, like an hour and a half away from the Oregon border, but it is so intricately hooked up to the northern extent of these same kinds of ecosystems in southwestern Oregon that it's long past time to connect them up. And I'd love to have you come and visit. And I remember years and years, 4 decades ago, visiting the Josephine serpentines, $8 Mountain and Illinois Valley, and then having the opportunity in California to get familiar with the south end of the same geologic features with many of them, the same flora, lots of Darlingtonia, lots of Porterford cedar, a lot of similarities, but they have their differences and they have their very unique signatures. And so I'm going to talk about something called the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet, which sounds super nerdy. I hope I can explain it, and I hope that you will come visit. So here we go. Notice first here that this is high elevation in the Eastern Trinity Alps. It's the reddish peridotite, which is, I'm going to talk about serpentine, ultramafics, that kind of stuff. So in the broad sense, ultramafics are rocks that are formed by, they're basically ocean floor that's been scraped up and pasted on to the edge of the continent. And the two main types that we deal with botanically are these kind of warty reddish ones called peridotite, and the shiny blue serpentinite that you know, if you're like me, you always steal a piece when you're out, you know, in serpentinite country. So I have a garden full of shiny blue rocks, and you probably do too. But right here, you can see in the Eastern Trinity Alps is the contact zone between the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet, the east, you know, the very edge of it, and the granitics that are next to it. And this is probably, you know, 8,500 feet in the Eastern Trinity Alps. So within the Klamath Ranges, including the Siskiyous in Oregon, but you know, in different parts of the Klamath Ranges in California, each of these sections or distinctive floras have their own unique endemics, you know, places, plants that grow there and no place else. So there are things that are uniters, you know, Darlingtonia. If you've got a wet spot, you've got a lot of Darlingtonia across the region. But these are things, the things that I'm going to show you are things that are unique to the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet. And a lot of it is because it's high elevation, which is not present in what we're used to in Oregon in the Josephine serpentines. So we'll go through these. You know, a lot of this is just eye candy. So the box here is drawn around the oldest part of the serpentines that were accreted onto the edge of the continental plate. And it is the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet. It's the oldest one, which partly makes it special because, you know, it's a super old landscape and it's the highest elevation one. You know, it's been exposed for the longest time. It served as a glacial refugium and a geologic refugium for plants that were, you know, freaking out, trying to go, you know, how can I survive an ice age? How can I survive, you know, this terrible, you know, thermal thing? It's like, well, come here. You can hang out here and you can spread out again when things are better. So I'm going to use my cursor. It's kind of spastic, but so here's the Josephine stuff, the newer stuff that goes up into southwestern Oregon. The intermediate stuff, you've got some stuff along the Siskiyou Crest. And then this really isolated blob here called it's called the Trinity Ophiolite or the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet that is distinctive and is the easternmost and oldest part of the Klamath Ranges serpentine. So I love geology maps. You know, I'm a stupid geologist. I've been reminded of that repeatedly. But you know, even somebody who's a stupid geologist can, you know, can pick out some things from here. The purple parts are the ultramafics, so peridotite, serpentinite. So this is the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet that I'm going to be talking about. But look up here, this is the Josephine ophiolite that extends up into Josephine County. And there are little bits over along the Siskiyou Crest too. And of course, this is a California map. So of course they draw a straight line across the border like it ends there. So here's the Oregon version. So the rest of it comes up this way. And we've got, here's the Josephine ophiolite that comes up into southwestern Oregon and little bits along the Siskiyou Crest. And there's some isolated stuff along here. So really the Klamath Ranges, I don't know how much in Oregon the term Klamath Ranges or Klamath Mountains is actually used, because my recollection from when I lived here and worked here was we just called this the Siskiyous, but it is considered the northern extent of the Klamath Ranges or the Klamath Mountains. And the Siskiyous are a sub-range of the Klamath Mountains, and they extend all the way up past Roseburg. So this blob here is the northern extent of the Klamath Mountains. Here's another version of it. This is an ecological map by EPA that shows the serpentine siskiyous. So here's the Josephine stuff down here. There's some isolated pieces, and then the part along the crest. And you'll notice that the boundaries are different, because if you've ever worked with an ecologist and a geologist and a soil scientist in the same room, they violently disagree. So the boundaries aren't going to agree. We're okay with that. Here's a really, this is like the Goth map of the Klamath Ranges. But the reason I like it is because it includes both California and Oregon. Here's the state line, Oregon, California at the 42nd parallel. But you can see, this is what I'm going to be talking about here, is the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet, which is the oldest accreted ophiolite, which is an ophiolite is a piece of ocean floor that's been scraped up and basically plastered on the edge of the continental sheet. And then this is the stuff that's more in Oregon, is the Josephine ophiolite, which is the youngest and newest, but still old piece of ocean floor that's been scraped up and plastered on the edge of the continental plate. So sorry, this is not really glitzy, but I think you can see there's that, this is the oldest one. This bit in the middle is the middle one, and then the Josephine ophiolite is the relatively newer one. But this is where our serpentine flora and our serpentine, bedrock geology and soils come from. Is these accretion events from ocean floor being dragged up and pasted onto the edge of the continental plate. So this is a geologist friend of mine described what I thought was probably the best analogy that I could grab for how do these ocean floor accretion events occur. And so I'm going to describe it the way he did. Okay, so imagine this brown thing is a pizza crust, and the little white thing is the stuff on top, like the cheese and the pepperoni. And this right here is the door. And so you've got some weirdo who's trying to shove a piece of pizza under a door, and the crust goes under the door, but all the cheese and the pepperoni and the olives and stuff, they're this kind of wad that just kind of sticks on the edge of the door, and not in any particular order. So it's not like a sequential thing as it developed on the ocean floor. It's just like this big wad of cheese and olives and pepperoni that's just got stuck onto the side of the continental plate. And that really is what our ophiolites are. That's why in serpentine country, we like to joke that if you don't like the geology, just drive down the road a quarter mile and you'll be in something totally different. You'll be in granite, you'll be in gabbro, you'll be in something, but it's just all mixed up. It's not orderly anymore because it has been pasted onto the edge of the plate. So the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet, like most of the other Trinity or Klamath Range serpentines, have a variety of different kinds of available inhabitable habitats. It's not just the substrate that's important. It's whether, is there water present? What elevation is it? What aspect is it? And are there soils, or is it just a big old rock outcrop or a barren? So we have these interspersed multiple habitats of serpent, and I'm going to use, for ultramafics, I use peridotite, which is the unweathered kind of reddish stuff. Serpentinite is the shiny green stuff. And the general terminology, the vernacular is just serpentine for anything that is that origin. So I hope I don't confuse you, but serpentine means both serpentinite, the shiny green stuff, and it means the peridotite, which is the unweathered pinky red stuff. But it's, you know, in these ophiolites that are pasted onto the edge of the continent, it's not a solid block of serpentine or ultramafics. It's interspersed with gabbro and granite, you know, granodiorite. So the geology is very complex. And it's really interesting. It's fun and interesting to realize after you've been botanizing for a while that you can tell what the substrate is by what the plants are, which is cool. So there's a variety of just rocks and then a lot of wetlands, woodlands and forests. There's quite a bit of chaparral. And unlike the Josephine ophiolite, there is subalpine and alpine in the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet because the elevation actually reaches alpine, you know, levels. It's above 9,000 feet. You're above whitebark pine, which doesn't happen closer to the coast. So this is just a bit of eye candy here. You know, some examples of Trinity Ultramafic Sheet habitats. You know, there's red fir, high elevation red fir forest. There's grassland with Jeffrey pine. There's chaparral with incense cedar and Jeffrey pine. There's higher elevation Pinus monticola, which is whitebark pine, and Jeffrey pine with these open rocky barrens. Lots of rock. You know, here's peridotite. This is the reddish pinkish stuff. Here's the blue-green serpentinite stuff. This is high elevation on Mount Eddy looking west. This is the skyline of the Trinity Alps and Deadfall Lake Basin here. There's a lake there. But, you know, barrens and then just big hunks of rock. And so as a botanist, how can you not like a rock outcrop? It's like the best thing ever. And wetlands, which is kind of unusual. You know, that the intermediate thing in between the Josephine and the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet, there's this long skinny thing called the Rattlesnake Creek terrain, which is also a very important ultramafic endemic flora, but there's literally no wetlands. And so there's no Darlingtonia, there are no lakes, there are none of these, you know, hanging meadows. It's just a really dry flora. And so part of what's really great about the Josephine in Oregon and this one in the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet is the abundance of water, which makes for just a tremendous expansion of the flora. You know, both the Josephine ophiolite and the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet have an abundance of Darlingtonia and Darlingtonia wetlands and associated species. The Trinity Ultramafic Sheet also has quite a number of extensive wet meadows with embedded fens and lakes and these hanging meadows with, you know, with spring-fed streams and high elevation, which adds to the diversity. This is up, you know, it's on the way to the top of Mount Eddy, but this is a Pinus valforiana foxtail pine stand. And foxtail pine is found in the Eddies and the Trinity Alps, and then in the far southern Sierra Nevada. It's a relic species, but super cool Pinus. Two main river systems drain the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet. One is the Trinity River. This flows into Trinity Reservoir, which then dumps out into the main stem Trinity River in Trinity County, and then, you know, goes out to hooks up with the Klamath and goes to the ocean. And then this one, just through basic rock pile, is the South Fork of the Sacramento River, which is worth a trip. It's a trippy place. You can see the trees. It's just a rock pile. So why is this place interesting and worth your time? The thing that makes it different from other serpentine is that the tremendous diversity of altitude, that is that it gets up to over 9,000 feet, the highest elevation in the Klamath Ranges, tremendous amount of water, tremendous amount of just various kinds of rock outcrops, ranging from the big, rock faces to barrens to interspersed bits of rock in the woodlands. And very large continuous areas of ultramafics, the serpentinite and peridotite, and it's really, really, really old. So it's been exposed a very long time. It's, this and the Appalachians are the oldest landscapes in the United States. And because of that, they are places where plants have migrated to survive in between climate change events. And so tremendously diverse and a lot of radiation after these climate events. A few oddball things, oaks kind of disappear. There just aren't a lot of oaks there, except for this cool Sadler oak, which I notice is one of your potential sponsorship oaks, which is a really interesting species. And Quercus vaccinifolia, the huckleberry oak, is very prominent, but none of the usual ones. There's hardly any interior or canyon live oak or black oak or white oak. It's just like, nah, we're out. We're just out. We don't do that. They don't like serpentine. Not a lot of invasives. This one's a terrible one. I don't know if you have that here. It marched over the summit of Highway 3 on Scott Mountain during my career with the Forest Service, and it's a horrible, horrible, horrible mustard. Without herbicide, it's pretty impossible, and we were just hand digging it, so it's pretty well thoroughly infested. A couple other interesting things about this particular ultramafic landscape is that because it's one of the very few openings in the Cascade Sierra axis from the Great Basin to the interior. I mean, you've got the Columbia Gorge, and then you've got Shasta Valley, and then you've got the desert in Southern California. So here, Shasta Valley has allowed plants to migrate from the Great Basin into the Klamath Ranges. And so there's some interesting things, really weird juxtapositions of, here you have greenleaf manzanita and big sagebrush and curl-leaf mountain mahogany, not birchleaf, not the one we're used to, but curl-leaf mountain mahogany, which is a Great Basin thing. And look at how big that thing is. Probably, I don't know, 2,000 years old. Amazing. Here's another shot of Mount Eddy. Is the tallest peak in the Klamath Ranges, 9,000 and something. And, big sagebrush and curl-leaf mountain mahogany, which just seems completely out of place. It did to me. It's normal now, but it seemed really weird. So I'm going to run through a few endemic plants, and here's the blue purple thing is the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet outline. The white lines are county lines. So this is Del Norte, Humboldt, Siskiyou, Trinity, and Shasta. And this is Trinity Reservoir, Shasta Reservoir, which are part of the California big water projects. And I-5 from Mount Shasta goes right up here. So Antinarius sawyeri, Sawyer's pussy toes, was named after a professor at Humboldt by one of his students. And it was named only a decade ago, and it's limited to a tiny, tiny area in the far eastern Trinity Alps, where the contact zone between the high elevation ultramafics and the granitics is. And it's on the ultramafics. It's only in a couple spots. It's dioecious, which means that it exists in both female and male individual forms, but any individual plant does not have both sexes, so it's one or the other. Super cute, everybody loves it, nobody can find any more. Arctostaphylos clamathensis, the Klamath manzanita, was also named, I don't know, 30 years ago. And when I first started working with Shasta-Trinity, I was very skeptical because, a new manzanita really, yeah, no, not so much. But I went and looked at it, and yeah, it's different. It's different. It's this blue-green shrubby thing, super glandular. And look at the geographic range. This one obviously is wrong. All these great databases allow you to access things that are obviously either georeferenced incorrectly, that is somebody put in the wrong dot, the wrong coordinates, or they just identified it wrong. And then you've got to track down and figure out how to fix it. Erythronium alpinum is limited to the really high elevations of the eddies, the eastern alpine and subalpine serpentines up there, super, super beautiful, white-leaved and big-headed. And there's Mount Shasta, looking from Mount Eddy over to Mount Shasta. Erythronium citrinum, I'm not sure if I think Erythronium citrinum gets into Oregon, but the other variety, citrinum, and the distinction is basically the color of the anthers. So this thing has picked up the purple anther color from some other thing that it had sex with. And citrinum, variety citrinum, has yellow or cream colored anthers. And so it's limited. These are wrong. This one up here, this one up here. These are obviously, inappropriate. It's endemic to the upper Trinity watershed. Scott Mountain bedstraw is one of the galians that has these super hairy nutlets, and they're hard to tell apart. There are several of them that look like this, and so you really have to be, you have to care a lot in order to sort this out from glabrescens or grayanum or one of the other hairy ones. But it's a thing. I love this one, Palanthos Del Ciganus. It used to be Phacelia Del Cigana, and then it got its own genus, I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But it's one of those ones that really likes periodic disturbance, because it likes to be in openings, but it does not like to be disturbed repeatedly. So the thing that makes this plant happy is disturb it once and then leave it alone for 15 years. So it loves these old roads that don't get driven on very often, but it's a very beautiful thing in it's in the Phacelia group in the waterleaf family, or if you like, the borage family, depending on what kind of taxonomy you prefer these days. Ivesea is a thing in the rose family related to your Horkelia hendersonii that's on the Siskiyou crest. This Ivesea, Horkelia, potentilla, they're all in this group of the rose family that are related, and the Iveseas have these three-dimensional mouse tail kind of leaves that are little tiny overlapping leaflets, very distinctive, and they have little skinny petals, and this one grows it grows on ultramafics in Jeffrey pine and incense cedar woodlands that are wet in the spring and then dry out in the summer. But limited distribution. This is a wonderful one. So this, for a long, long, long time, was thought to be the same species as one that occurs in the desert mountains of Southern California, in Sweetwater Mountains, one called Polemonium chartaceum. I forget what the common name of that one is. But anyway, fairly recently, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, graduate student finally did some molecular work and decided this one is actually different. And so this one, Mount Eddy sky pilot, only occurs on Mount Eddy. It's not, despite people looking for it, it's not been found anywhere else. And sadly, it's right at the top. And so global warming being what it is, there's no place for it to go if it has to migrate. So this one's a big concern for conservation reasons. Penstemon filiformis is one of the group that if you've ever tried to key out a penstemon, the first thing you come to is, what do the anthers look like? What do the pollen producing tips of the stamens look like? Are they flat and round? Do they look like arrowheads? Are they super hairy? This is one of the arrowhead ones. This is one of the sagittate anthered ones. And it's distinguished by being small, it's petite, got very skinny leaves, divergent pedicels, and it's really glandular, and it's got a pretty distinctive geographic range. This is one of my favorites, Shelly Ray Largella, which is in the sunflower family. I mean, it just looks like bedhead, it's like burnt orange bedhead, and it grows right in the water in these big old fleshy mats, in amongst the rocks. It had some hard times, in past decades because it was in cattle allotments and it got eaten a lot. But as soon as the cows left, it just bounded back and is super happy. So it's a success story. Oh, this is mine. I initiated a study of sedums because they were so problematic taxonomically, and I hired a bunch of smart people who you probably know, Barbara Wilson and Dick Brainerd and Peter Zika and Nick Otting, who at the time were called the Carex Working Group out of Corvallis and Eugene. And I had these 3 rare sedum species on the Shasta-Trinity, and it was ridiculous. You could not key them out. 3 different keys, 3 different results. So I hired them and said, figure this out and I'll pay you money. And they couldn't stop. So they figured it out for the entirety of California and Oregon, published a giant monograph, and they named this one after me, which made me happy because it's in the place I like the best. So it's not rare, it's super common where it is. It's just, you can see it's geographically very restricted, but really cute. Silene salmonacea is part of a group that you're probably familiar with, the Silene hookeri group, which is the Hooker's catchfly. And I think you have Bolander's catchfly here. It's been kind of overhauled in the last few years by a professor at Humboldt State named Mike Messler. And he named a new one from Trinity County called Silene nelsonii. And he's nicely laid out the pollination biology and the ecology and the genetics and the ranges of this group. And so there's Silene hookeri, which extends into Oregon, Silene bolanderi, which is in Oregon. This one, Silene salmonacea, is endemic to the upper Trinity River in Trinity County. And Silene nelsonii also is endemic to Trinity County. And I think that's all of them. Seems like I missed one, but I think that's all of them. But they're all beautiful. So a few other oddballs that are not endemic, but just oddballs. So tons of Darlingtonia. Now you're used to that because the Darlingtonia centers, this is the Josephine ophiolite, that extends up into Josephine County. So lots of Darlingtonia up here. But then there's this kind of gap here, and it picks up again in the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet where it's very, very abundant. But did you know that it also occurs in the Sierra Nevada? It skips over the Cascades, which are boring, volcanic, and dry, and it picks up again in the northern Sierra Nevada. There are wetlands there. Some of them are serpentine, some not. But I was not really tuned into the fact that, I knew it was here and up on the Oregon coast and into southwestern Oregon and in the interior Siskiyou, Trinity, Shasta zone, but somehow I'd kind of forgotten that it also reoccurs down here in the northern Sierra Nevada. So here you go. You know, these are hooked together. The Klamath Ranges and the Sierra are hooked together geologically and deep historically, and then the Cascade volcanics came in and just kind of, you know, hooped over the top of them and separated them. Port Orford cedar, also, you know, plentiful on the coast up into southwestern Oregon. Then there's a gap, and it reappears in the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet. And sadly, a lot of the stuff on the coast is infected with Phytophthora, the root disease. But most of the inland stuff is not. So, you know, that's a somewhat happy side note. You know, it doesn't seem to be on the verge of extinction. It's just that a lot of the adult trees get infected and die. And it's a beautiful tree. And here, just a few oddballs. You know, what the heck? Glossopetalain is like a Great Basin, Eastern Oregon thing. And here it is, Trinity Ultramafic Sheet. How did that happen? Is that a relictual thing? Kind of had to be a leftover from some previous, you know, age of plant distribution. Because why would it migrate there? I have noticed there are a number of plants that have dual distributions on serpentine in the Klamath Range and then on super alkaline soils in the Great Basin. I don't know if you looked at them molecularly, if they would turn out to be sister species, but there is this kind of disjunct distribution of serpentine and alkaline. You know, they're able to tolerate weird, unfriendly substrates. Parnassia serrata, the cascade grass of Parnassus, which is apparently pretty plentiful up the Cascades, but then it skips over to the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet in a couple of places in the Great Basin. You know, I don't get it. This one is a true weirdo, and you should really look at it. Look for it in southwestern Oregon. It's a gentian, thing in the gentian family. Doesn't have a great common name. It's called Swartia, which is a horrible name. But you know, Southern Sierra, just a couple occurrences. It grows with Darlingtonia. Look for it. Look for it in Darlingtonia. A couple places in Siskiyou County, and then Eastern Oregon, which is, you know, okay. How did that happen? But I would bet money that this thing would turn up in southwestern Oregon if you looked for it. And this one, Phacelia sericea, which is probably the prettiest Phacelia I have ever seen, which is mostly an eastern, east side thing, Great Basin, east side of the Cascades, but it's in one place, literally one place in the Klamath Ranges, and one unsubstantiated rumor in southwestern Oregon. I looked it up on the Oregon Flora site, and it said, yeah, it was an observation in 1996 with no observer. So somebody should go look for that. So let's talk about, if you wanted to go there, we're gonna close up here, but if you want to go check this place out, how do you get there? Where do you stay? What's the best time of year? So this is a terrible resolution map, it's best I could find, but it's hard to find a map that goes all the way to Oregon. So you're going to come down I-5, and you can either peel off at Wairika and come down Highway 3 and go all the way to Scott Mountain. You know, you can come into the north end of it here, and then down Highway 3 past Trinity Reservoir to Weaverville. And there are a number of campgrounds and there's lodging, although some of the stuff burned up this last fire season. So some of the former resorts at Coffee Creek and around Trinity Center are at least temporarily gone, but they're places to stay. You can come further down to the Gazelle exit, which is north of Weed, and come across to a beautiful campground called Kangaroo Lake, which is just a great place to stay. And it's the northern end of northern, I don't know where my cursor is disappearing. There it is. Anyway, so Gazelle to Kangaroo Lake, and that you can get over to Highway 3 from there. Just north of Weed is the access to the Parks Creek Road, which is paved all the way to the Pacific Crest Trailhead that goes up to Mount Eddy on the one end, and it goes to Scott Mountain on the other end. So it's one of the few paved roads that gets into the heart of this area. So, you know, this is a garish and terrible map, but the yellow is the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet. So here's Mount Shasta, Castle Crags Wilderness. This is Interstate 5, Highway 3, Trinity Lake. And here's the Pacific Crest Trail. So you can access much of it through the PCT. So again, Interstate 5, PCT crosses at Castle Crags State Park. There's another trailhead here that you access from the town of Mount Shasta by driving up the South Fork of the Sacramento River. There's a nice campground here at Gumboot Lake. And this way you can, you know, go either way. But this you can walk to Mount Eddy, which is really the jewel of the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet if you want to get up into the subalpine and alpine. And then the next trailhead is here at Parks Creek Summit. This is the one that goes up to the summit of Mount Eddy. And then if you continue on the PCT, these orange squares are sections that were recently acquired by the Forest Service, by the Shasta-Trinity. They were purchased from a timber company in Holder. And so these will be, over the next few years, developed with better trailheads and better roads. The roads are just crap right now. So this is the Parks Creek Summit. This has a paved road to it. You can then walk to the Scott Mountain Summit, which is the paved Highway 3 road that goes ultimately to Wairika on the north side and then to Weaverville on the south side. The roads are not great, other than the few paved roads, but you should be prepared for roads like this that have washouts, and you need high clearance, and you may need to ford a creek now and then. This is the Parks Creek Road to the trailhead that goes to Mount Eddy that's paved all the way. Generally, if there's any kind of snow, there's a giant snow bank here that lasts until the 1st of July. And then usually somebody comes and plows it because people want to get on the trail for 4th of July. There aren't a lot of bathrooms, you know, be prepared for backcountry comfort. And if you want to go, you know, there are two general things that people go for. One is just to enjoy the wildflowers because they're spectacular. And so go to Mount Eddy, you know, go to Scott Mountain, go to Stonewall Pass, just drive down Highway 3 and stop at a campground. There's a lot of, you know, there's a beautiful fen trail out of the Kangaroo Lake campground that takes you up to the ridge line that goes right through a Darlingtonia fen and has interpretive signs. And so you can completely enjoy this as a destination vacation. If you want to collect, which I encourage you because it's under collected, and I'm a collector, I'm a floristics person, I'm into the Klamath Ranges, getting documented. If you want to collect, get a collecting permit, which you can easily get, and please deposit your specimens in the public herbarium. And what I would say, you know, my quick and dirty analysis just using CalFlora was that this area came up with what, 1,299 taxa. And virtually all of them were collected along roads or trails. So there's new stuff happening all the time, you know, that I think in the last the last decade, there have been 10 new species in this area, and there'll be 10 more new ones next decade. All it really takes is somebody who is the key, you know, from what I can tell from my experience is you go through a period of you try to key things out and you can't, and you think you're bad at keying. You just think it's your fault. But you need to switch your mindset to thinking, maybe this is not in the key. Maybe it's not that I'm bad at this. Maybe this is not in the key. Maybe I'm really good at it, and this is a new thing. So whenever you come across something that's just inscrutable, please, by all means, make a specimen, you know, give it to SOU, give it to Humboldt, give it to Chico, give it to some, or give it to Oregon State, whatever. Just give it to a herbarium where it will at least sit in the unknown folder until somebody comes along and says, oh man, you know, it wasn't that long ago that a woman at Duke University in North Carolina called me and said, hey, you know, I ground up this maidenhair fern specimen from Shasta County that came out in a completely different place on the family tree. So what do you know about a weirdo, you know, maidenhair fern? And all I could say was, well, yeah, there's this really common maidenhair fern that I never can key out, but I just thought I was bad at it. And it turned out it's, you know, Adiantum shastense. It's a brand new thing. So you're not bad at it. It's just not described. Trust yourself. So a few people that have really made a difference, Dean Taylor here, who sadly died suddenly a year ago. We miss him a lot, but he did a lot of collecting in the Klamath Ranges. Dana York, who worked in Roseburg for the feds for a while, and then went to Death Valley and worked in Sequoia Kings Canyon, and now is in Eureka working for Caltrans and working on a flora of the Marble Mountains in the Klamath Ranges. Jennifer Whipple did her master's degree at Humboldt on the flora of Mount Eddy, spent her career at Yellowstone and recently retired and now is back in Siskiyou County. And, you know, that's neat. So the next important thing is just off the road, and I encourage you to do it. Please, we need it. We need you. So thanks a lot. Thanks for listening. And I'm available for questions or emails or, you know, just general nerd talk. Also visit this site. I think I used up all my time.
Okay. Let me just get myself plugged back into my mic. We've been scrolling through the questions as they're rolling in. And so I'm going to scroll back up to the top and start with some of the questions. I think we got just a few comments at the beginning. Yes, first off, thank you so much, Julie. What a treat to get a little tour of the Trinities. I hope some of our members can connect with that idea that, yeah, the Trinity Shasta area and the Siskiyou area, Klamath Siskiyou area that I think I hear more commonly referred to in Oregon are definitely connected areas, and that seems like the Ultramafic sheet just has this special grouping of plants because of its unique geology. Okay, so I think one of the first questions we got or comments was from Rebecca Franklin, who would love to know the location of that curly leaf mahogany.
Julie, do you want to stop your screen share again?
Oh, sure. I have to find this. Oh, there we go. Okay. The curly mountain mahogany is not hard to find. It starts showing up if you take the paved Parks Creek Road from the Edgewood exit, which is north of Weed, up to the Parks Creek Summit trailhead to Mount Eddy. The really giant ones are in Deadfall Basin, which is on the the PCT into toward the summit of Mount Eddy, but the picture that I showed you of the really big one I was sitting on is at Lower Deadfall Lake in the Deadfall Basin of Mount Eddy.
Awesome. Great. What a detailed, awesome answer. I expressed a little bit of being impressed or surprised that it's 2,000 years old. And Rebecca commented back, there is a paper with a reported oldest age of mountain mahogany at approximately 1,700 years old, but has heard that 1,700 is not an accurate age from other mountain mahogany researchers. So that's kind of an interesting discourse about aging those trees. Christy and some other folks left some comments about the expansion of Dyer's Wood into the Applegate and the Illinois Valley. Denman Wildlife Refuge seems to have some populations, Williams Creek. So it does seem like, unfortunately, Dyer's Wood has been spreading into the basin around here.
I'm sorry,
Christy,
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah, I think I've spent some time pulling it myself. It sounds like so is Christy, and she has a question. Julie, how does it feel to discover a new species? Thank you for paying careful attention out there.
It's really gratifying to realize that all those years of thinking that I was just bad at it, that I was actually looking at something new, and that just that tipping point of going from, hey, I can do this, from thinking that I didn't have the capability, and feeling a kinship with all the people that have found new things and blundered around and tried to figure out if they really were new, or put them out there and gotten rejected, or put them out there and it turned out to be a real thing. It's fun and exhilarating, and it's encouraging to me to know that, I don't have a PhD. I'm not an academic. I just spent a lot of time in nature and look at things. And, I guess my message would be, if I can do it, you can do it. You just have to have the confidence to be persistent enough to think that this thing that simply is not described in any of your books, simply is not in your books. It's not you, it's the book. It's not there. And the Klamath Ranges are a classic unexplored area where there are a lot of holes. And so I think there are a lot of things that are simply not in the literature that, but actually I was just talking today, I had an email from Dana York, who's one of the other great explorers of this region. And we were talking about this onion that just doesn't fit anywhere. And we kind of went back and forth and said, yeah, we think this might be a new thing. It's not falcifolium, the big pink one with the sickle leaves, and it's not siscuense, which is the pale pink that's smaller. It's like, it just doesn't fit. So probably going to have to write a paper and hang a name on it. So there's just, once you break that barrier of thinking you're not good enough, or you're not smart enough, or you're not educated enough to detect something that's different, all of a sudden the floodgates open, and it's like there's new stuff everywhere.
I guess I really want to ask more about like keys and flora in this unique place where there's, Jepson and the northern books that people use, and we're kind of in this in-between place. But I will move on to other questions.
Well, I will say it's frustrating to me that the Jepson Manual and Oregon Flora have significant differences in the way that they treat not just species but families, which I'm still trying to recover from the disaggregation of the lily family into 15 or 20 different families. And could you please just agree what they are? And they don't.
Slow recovery while
yeah.
there's more genetics pouring
Well,
through.
yeah, yeah.
I guess I had just a quick question about the name of the group that contains Ibecia, potentilla, etc. within the rose family that you mentioned. I didn't quite catch that group name.
I think the section is probably called the potentilla. You know, it's the
Okay.
the overarching group is potentilla, but it's been disaggregated, you know, into, you know, there's Ivesea and there's potentilla, and now there's Drymacalis, and there's just a bunch of different genera in it. But I think of it as kind of the big potentilla group.
Great. Okay, and Alyssa or Eliza Sawich asks, have any of these plants been grown outside of their native range?
Yeah, probably quite a few of them. Trying to think. You know, there are always specialty growers. And just because something grows on weird soil, like ultramafic soil, doesn't mean that it has to. It may mean more that it grows there because it's able to tolerate that and escape competition from other things. And so a number of the sedums certainly have been grown. There's quite a fan club of sedums that are, you know, propagated by what's the word I'm looking for? Not cell culture. What is it? Anyway, not necessarily collecting the sedums, but the sedums are grown. I think I'm not aware of some of the, like the Ivesea or the some of the oddball stuff. You know, I would say that probably half of the stuff is at least grown in, you know, in private culture, maybe not in commercial culture, just because people like to grow stuff and they're adventurous and into it. But I don't see a lot of these things for sale commercially, except for the sedums are definitely for sale commercially because there's a big market for that. You know, sedums and dudleys and other succulents.
Cool. Thank you. Christy asks, Swertia perennis, what elevation in the Trinity and Darlingtonia fens?
You know, it's not that high. I would guess it's maybe 3,000 feet, at most 4,000. You know, it's not high up. It's mysterious why it's there. It's really mysterious to me why it's there and not elsewhere, unless it's been undetected. And one of the things about the Klamath Ranges is that, say, compared to the Sierra Nevada, it's really under-botanized. You know, the number of, the ratio of botanists to acres and the ratio of universities to acres is so severely low in the Klamath Ranges that I'm sure a lot of it is just simply a lack of detection because there aren't people looking. There just aren't people out rummaging around in these places to find things the way, I mean, if you think about, you know, UC Davis and Berkeley and San Francisco State University and all these big universities that just unleash a torrent of graduate students and undergraduates into the Sierra Nevada every year, and they just comb the mountains. But who does that in the Klamath Range? You know, the Humboldt students don't really go there. The Chico State doesn't go there. SOU doesn't go there. Where are the people? And so, I mean, that's frustrating in terms of of getting on with the program in terms of figuring this stuff out, but it means that it's really wide open for exploration and discovery for anybody who's interested in plants. I mean, you don't have to be a PhD, you don't have to be a professor, you don't have to be a graduate student. You just have to be somebody who likes plants, who's observant and notices things that are different. That's all.
I think that's a great segue into Rachel's question. She asks, could you comment more on the Klamath Sierra Nevada floristic connections?
Oh yeah.
Sierra Nevada floristic influences in the Klamath, ? If you look at the timing of the separation of the Darlingtonia populations with that time with the Cascades, approximately 25 million years ago-ish. Great question, Rachel. Loved it.
I have a partner in crime, a man named Len Lindstrand, who's done a lot of field work with me and published some things together. And one of the things that we have over the years come to recognize is what we call the Cascade Gap. And there are a number of species that either exist on either side of the Cascade Gap and not in between. And one of them was, we worked on this species that we ultimately published called Vaccinium shastense. And Vaccinium shastense occurs down the Sierra Nevada. We called it subspecies nevadense because, we didn't have a great imagination, so we just called it nevadense. And the other one in Shasta County we called subspecies shastense, but it does not occur in the volcanics of the Cascade Gap. And we started looking at other related species, and there are a lot of them that simply vanish in the Cascade Gap. They're in the Sierra, they're in the Klamath, and they don't occur in between. Some of them are sister species. There's one really interesting one. There's a, it's not charismatic. It's something called, used to be called Scirpus kreiniger or Erythronium kreiniger. It was a cotton grass that occurs in wetlands, kind of a, big bedhead thing. And some Europeans did molecular analysis and decided, well, this is a different genus. We're going to call it Calliscirpus. And it's two different species. One of them is Calliscirpus kreiniger in the Klamath ranges and Calliscirpus brachythrix in the Sierra Nevada. And that seems to be kind of a pattern. Is there, I think more and more, as people look at these disjunctions between the Sierra Nevada and the Klamath Range, they will probably discover that they have diverged enough that they're now sister species rather than actual, conspecific things that are interrupted by the volcanics. So I think it's going to be a thing. I think it's going to be, a trend over time that, it's what you would expect. That if you have a species that diverges and is cut off from its, its conspecific populations, the things that it's related to, that over time they change and they're not the same thing anymore. And so, the longer this gap is in place, the longer it happens. We've got a lot of examples now. We've got some sedums, and we've got, I remember the, Draperia. I don't know, does Draperia get into Oregon? It's this weird hydrophyllaceae thing. But, it's definitely a Cascade Gap thing, and the woman that was looking into it thought that it was two different things. But now that we have the molecular tools to actually decide whether they've diverged enough to give them different names, then we can figure that out. But, I don't have a lab, so I'm not going to do it.
Thank you. I have seen that a lot when I look at like species distributions. I've seen that, and I don't feel like it's really called out. And so thank you for clarifying that.
I think it needs a paper. I think somebody needs to write a paper about the Cascade Gap.
Rachel's on it. Just kidding. Brian Dykstra just says, thank you, Julie. And Stephen Lazar asks, can you talk a little bit about what's going on geologically near Lake Anna? The color changes are stark.
Lake Anna. Okay, remind me where Lake Anna is. I'm drawing a blank.
This would be a great time to unmute and turn on your videos. Stephen Lazar, if you're still in the group chat. I'm not familiar.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so. Sorry.
Oh, unmute. I can't hear you.
Okay, I'm back. Okay.
Okay.
So Lake Anna is on the east side of the Trinities. It's accessible. It's north of Coffee Creek. It's right. Well, Stonewall is south
right,
of
right.
it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, I know Lake Anna.
Okay.
So it's in that very it's that strip of the Eastern Trinity Alps that is the edge of the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet. That's that distinctive color. You know, the pinky red color. And so, what was your question?
Yeah, just that you have that break right there, and there's almost like 3 different colors that I've noticed on trips up to the crest at the watershed divide there. And so, are you saying it's at the edge of the Ultramafic Sheet? Is that or
yeah? So there's a definite contact zone there between the Trinity Ultramafic Sheet, which is that pinky red color, and then the granite, which is white.
Right.
And then probably there's some intermediate stuff that's maybe mixed, like you know, glacial till or something. But yeah, the contact zone between the white granite and the red ultramafics is really stark right there at Lake Anna.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
And other folks, if you want to turn your video on, we love seeing your faces. Okay, and so Artie Kirch says, thank you, Julie, especially for the info on how to get where to go. Rebecca Franklin also says, thank you. Ian Gillespie asks, I used to study California macrophylla. I'm relatively new to Ashland. Where is the imperatus property?
Christy connected on that. They've got that handled.
Oh, I see that right below. Okay, and he says thanks. And another question from Elisa or Lisa. I've noticed that very old landscapes often have huge diversity of plant species. The Klamath Siskiyou, South Africa comes to mind. Is it generally nutritionally poor soils or for some other reasons?
It's partly that and partly the Mediterranean climates of the Western North America, South Africa, Western Australia, Chile. The winter wet, summer dry climates tend to produce a tremendous diversity of geophytes and annuals that is not present in places where there's summer rainfall.
Awesome. Rebecca Johnson said that she loved learning about the mysteries of this mountain. Thank you for your time. And I skipped a question that I had sort of about how, or asking maybe that you could elaborate on how you determine whether or not a plant population is recently migratory or sort of like a relic population that maybe was more widespread in an area, and how that decision process. You were talking a little bit about it when you were on the greasewood slide, and it sounded like you had an intuition about it, and I was just curious how you make that sort of decision.
When I see, you know, we have such great databases now that you can see visually where plants occur. You know, there's the Oregon Flora database, there's CalFlora, there are lots of places where you can see visually where plants occur. And when I see these odd distributions that look like they formerly were probably more widespread, and now they've contracted to really, to safe places, like safe havens. That says to me that they were formerly more widespread across the landscape, and now they have retreated to places that are safer for them now. And some of it I'm probably wrong. It's intuitive, but some of it's probably wrong. But I know that the Klamath Ranges, not historically, because not in human times, but geologically have been a place that a lot of plants have hung out and hid out to just wait out terrible climatic events, and then have radiated out again and speciated and so. It's really interesting to me that things are in the Klamath Ranges, and then there's someplace far away. That says to me, like, what happened here? What, like the one of the ones that I'm familiar with is the Shasta snow wreath, which is a little endemic shrub that was discovered a couple decades ago around Shasta Lake. That the nearest relative is in a very small area in southeastern United States, and the two of them are related to something in China, and related to something that's in the fossil record in BC. And it seems pretty clear that at one point it was pretty widespread, and now it's just kind of sucked back into these little relictual, relatively safe, happy areas where before it was a lot more widespread.
Awesome. That's kind of the intuition that I was getting. It's interesting to think about radiation and adaptive radiation from small pockets, or like the broader radiation that happens of a really good, like well-suited plant for many climates, and then it gets stuck in a place when that climate is no longer available, or like another environmental variable. And that is a great feature about this landscape. And it's interesting that we habitate this place where there's a lot of that happening, and it's rather undescribed. That is an interesting situation. Those were the end of our questions. Did you have any other adds, Rachel?
I was going to ask Julie, I could have missed it, but did you provide your email? If you're willing to share it, you could drop it into the chat. That's not an obligation, but you said people could email you. And
yeah, that's fine. Let's see. I have to go find the chat.
Oh, it's at the bottom, probably in the bubble.
In the participants?
To the right of that, probably. There's like a white bubble says chat.
Okay, let's see.
I can drop it in there.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. I see it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to me that, I'm sure this is politically incorrect. It's interesting to me that the Klamath Ranges are roughly the same geographical outline as the state of Jefferson. And I grew up in Coos Bay. I spent my career in Redding, California. So either end of the state of Jefferson. It's so bizarre to me that a place with such amazing biological importance would coincide with a political boundary that is so I don't even know what the word is.
Unique and diverse.
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking. That's it.
Polarized.
Yeah.
Some words.
Oh, armed. Don't forget armed. Yeah.
It is really interesting. And I also think about that with the floras, like the different texts, just kind of not quite covering it too. And it's like these sort of populated, well-studied places. And in between is this really uniquely speciated place, but also, and I feel like the life strategies are.
Well, one of the things about working for the Forest Service that has struck me is that, and visiting with friends who also, do this kind of work, is that we all gravitate toward these semi-rural places that are really beautiful and biologically diverse, and we have access to nature, and we get out, and they're the exact same places where these social issues play out of the typical rural issues of independence and being armed and being ready for an insurrection, and perhaps being really fearful of government. And it's just bizarre that we have all these biologists, not just botanists, but all these natural historians who are in places, who are living in places that are kind of antithetical to their being. So that's kind of dark. Sorry, that's kind of dark.
No, I think a lot of people who dwell in rural places definitely wonder about that, like, dichotomy.
Sure.
Of how to coexist in these
right. How do I
interesting social situations
place where my neighbors all have AR-15s?
Yeah. It takes maybe some climactic emergencies to bring us together. Real quick.
Sorry.
It's I think you are preaching to the choir. I'm not going to speak for everyone, but there was a question just real quick about a place to get sort of acquainted with some of the geologies for this region. Chrissy suggested Assembling California by John McPhee. And it seems like you might have some ads to that, perhaps. Just before people all sign out, we can go back to the state of Georgia.
It's sad that that Oregon and California geology seem to kind of diverge at the border. I would love to see some more convergent Klamath Mountains or Klamath Range geology. I noticed that when I look at the EPA ecosystem stuff, they said, oh, well, we haven't mapped it in California. It's like, well, okay, you haven't, but somebody else did. But there's this bright line boundary, and so it's sad to me that there's not a more congruent series of maps and interpretive products for the Klamath Ranges that span Oregon and California, because the boundary is obviously artificial.
I think the political boundaries, just political, like I'm an Oregonian, I'm a Californian, those boundaries, it's amazing. It took, I went to school at Humboldt State, and then in 2006, after a lot of things in between, I moved to Ashland. And for a long time, thinking about where to go explore, I would always go deeper into Oregon. And it took me a few years to go, oh, wait a minute, like the marbles and the Klamaths are right there. Yeah. And it seems way less populated. You hike the trails around here and they're just crowded. Whereas if you just go over the border, it's far from California, and Oregon doesn't think about it. Some of Oregon does, but much less than you would think.
You're right. I think the time is right for some blending of the Oregon and Northern California populations that care about this place.
Yes. Well, we'll see you at our next chapter meeting.
You will.
Good.
The thank yous are pouring in. It sounds like people are are logging off, but are also really grateful for such an exciting talk with really great visuals. Just putting my 2 cents in there. Yeah, people are excited, and I think the theme of bridging that, bridging the broader eco-region more appropriately, despite political boundaries, is to be
Good, very good.
seems to be catching. But don't tell everyone, Rachel.
Just this group, just botanists.
Just botanists.
Just these 26 people.
Well, the botanists will all be like slowly walking along this tree and not like doing all the other things. And you'll know.
I know.
It's your crowd.
Thanks so much, Julie.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to
Okay.
glad to get a little toe in the water with your group.
Yeah, great. Seriously, we want to have you. I didn't see your email come up, but I'm sure I can get a hang of it, the handle of it.
I did.
Ooh, Leslie Lewis says to blame the Lemurians for the problem.
Oh, totally. Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I did.
Are the comments recorded in the recording, Rachel? Did they print out a
I think so. Yeah, the chat, you know, I don't know if we get it into the YouTube, but if you want to save the chat on your own computer, if you just go down to the bottom of the chat, there's an option. The top option is save chat. If you've opened up the chat pane on the right hand side, or the ellipsis, the 3 little dots, you click that and then save chat. But it definitely comes up in the Zoom recording. I'm not sure if we put it into the YouTube recording.
Nope. If it's just somewhere, I feel like there's a lot of resources for folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, save that chat.
It looks like I just sent my email directly to Kathleen Pyle.